أهلا بيكم في دروس الأحياء للصف الثالث ثانوي. Last time we talked about the axial skeleton, and today we will talk about the appendicular skeleton, part of the support and movement in man. So let's begin. The appendicular skeleton معناها الهيكل الطرفي، مش المحوري اللي احنا أخدناه في المحاضرة اللي فاتت. الهيكل الطرفي يعني الإيدين والرجلين. The appendicular skeleton is formed of the pectoral girdle that connects to the upper limb and the pelvic girdle that connects to the lower limb. Okay, so the pectoral girdle أو الحزام الصدري that connects to the upper limb consists of two identical bones, one on each side. Each half consists of the scapula, as you can see here. This is the right scapula viewed from the front. This is the inner part of the scapula. See, it's broad, and this is the outer part, which has this structure, which is called the glenoid cavity. This is the glenoid cavity that accommodates the head of the humerus. Humerus هي عظمة الدراع العلوي. Accommodates the head of the humerus to form the shoulder joint. So the shoulder joint is formed in this glenoid cavity. Okay. Also, the scapula connects to a thin bone anteriorly. This bone, this is called the clavicle, أو بالعربي اسمها عظمة الترقوة. The clavicle, it connects to the scapula, and the clavicle is the only bony connection of the upper limb to the body by articulating with the sternum. Okay, in this part the clavicle articulates with the sternum, and there are no other articulations between the scapula or clavicle with the body. So the upper limb, the only bony connection or joint connection with the upper limb is the medial end of the clavicle with its joint with the sternum. Okay, so we learned the pectoral girdle, which is formed of the scapula. You see, it's a thin bone. You can see through this bone the scapula. Don't forget that the inner part is broad and the outer part contains the glenoid cavity, and it has a process that articulates with the clavicle. This is the clavicle, to form the pectoral girdle, which is the only bony connection of the upper limb with the body. Okay, and do not forget the shoulder joint that's formed between the head of the humerus that we will study later and the glenoid cavity. Okay, so let's proceed. Each upper limb consists of an arm or an upper arm, a forearm or the lower arm, and the hand. The hand, it has the wrist and the metacarpals and the phalanges. So the upper limb is formed of the arm or the upper arm. Okay, so if you encounter the word arm, it means only this part of the upper limb. Okay, and the forearm أو الدراع الأمامي, or the lower arm, it's called the lower arm also, this part, and the hand. Okay, now the upper arm has only one bone, which is the humerus, that the one you can see here. This is the humerus. It has an upper end, which is the head, and the lower end. On the other hand, the forearm or the lower arm contains two bones. The medial bone, please concentrate here. The medial bone, which is the ulna. The medial bone towards the body, closer to the body, is the ulna. And the lateral bone is the radius. Okay? Now, you're all, of course, familiar with rotation of the arm. What rotates of these two bones? Which bone rotates? The radius rotates on the ulna. Okay, so the radius is the mobile bone that freely rotates, over the ulna for the rotation of the forearm. So do not forget, we have the humerus in the arm, we have the ulna and radius in the forearm, and the ulna is medial, the radius is lateral. Do not forget this. Okay? Okay. This is a real bone. This is the humerus. This is the upper end of the humerus, the head, that articulates with the glenoid cavity. If you are asked about which part of the scapula the head of the humerus articulates with the glenoid cavity to form the shoulder joint. And here we have the lower end of the humerus. It has a process, see this protrusion, that fits in a cavity in the ulna. This cavity, this process, this projection fits in the cavity of the ulna. This is the ulna and this is the radius. This is the right arm, the right, I shouldn't say this now, the right upper limb. This is the right arm and this is the right forearm. Okay, now for the wrist joint, it consists of 8 bones in 2 rows. See, 8 bones in 2 rows. They are called the carpal bones. The carpal bones. The carpal bones articulate with the distal end of the radius proximally, or the upper end of the this row of bones articulates with the lower end of the radius, and the lower margin of these bones articulates with the metacarpals. So we have the carpals and we have the metacarpals. See, we start counting from the thumb, from the big finger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the proximal ends, or the upper ends of the metacarpals, articulate with the carpal bones, while the lower ends of the metacarpals articulate with the phalanges. Now we have, of course, 5 fingers. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each finger contains 3 phalanges: proximal, middle, and distal phalanges. Okay, individual called phalanx. This is the proximal phalanx, this is the middle phalanx, this is the distal phalanx, except for the thumb, which is the big toe. Although it's called a big toe, it has only 2 phalanges, proximal and distal. Okay, proximal and distal phalanges. So remember, the fingers have 3 phalanges each that articulate with the metacarpals, the palm of the hand, and the big finger has only 2 phalanges, proximal and distal, while the rest of the fingers have 3 phalanges. The pelvic girdle. Now we're going to the lower limb. The pelvic girdle, الحزام الحوضي, is formed of 2 identical bones, one on each side, see that, connecting to the sacrum of the vertebral column to form the pelvis. This is the pelvis. Now these 2 bones posteriorly, they articulate with the sacrum, but anteriorly, see, they articulate with each other in what's so-called the pubis, or the symphysis pubis. Pubis, or the symphysis pubis. See, posteriorly it articulates with the sacrum، متصلة ورا مع الساكرم، لكن قدام الاتنين مع بعض في حتة اسمها السيمفيسيس pubis. Between the pubic bones, the pubic parts of the hip bones. Each bone is called a hip bone. Now this is an individual hip bone. See that? Each hip bone is formed of 3 parts. An upper part called the ilium. This is the ilium. Anterior part called the pubic bone. This is the pubic bone. And posterior part called the ischium, or the ischial bone. See that? Why there are three parts? Though when we were young, before the age of 21, they were separate. They were articulating in what's so called here the acetabulum. عارفين acetabulum يعني ايه؟ باللاتيني acetic acid يعني حمض الخليك. acetabulum يعني إناء الخل، اللي هي الأطباق الخشب اللي كانوا زمان بيشيلوا فيها الخل. acetabulum. So these three bones meet in the acetabulum. The acetabulum is for articulating with the head of the femur. Femur يعني فخذ. Femur يعني عظمة الفخذ. So here is the hip joint formed between the acetabulum and the head of the femur, okay, to form the hip joint. So remember again, the pelvic girdle is two identical bones, the hip bones together. Posteriorly, they communicate with the, or articulate with the sacrum of the vertebral column. We studied the sacrum before. And anteriorly, they articulate with each other at the pubic bones in what's so called the pubis or the symphysis pubis, okay? And each hip bone is formed of three parts: the ilium, the pubic bone, and the ischial bone. They all meet in the acetabulum, which is this depression. Acetabulum is the site of formation of the hip joint where it articulates with the head of the femur. Pardon. Okay. Each lower limb consists of the thigh, the leg, and the foot. Okay? Pelvis, thigh, leg, foot. But pelvis is part of the pelvic girdle. So the lower limb proper, formed of the femur or the thigh, the leg and or the shank, and the foot. The thigh contains only one bone. It's the biggest bone in the body. It's called the femur. See that? It's the femur. It has an upper end, a head that forms the hip joint with the acetabulum, and the lower end. See this lower end that forms the knee joint with the upper end of the tibia. And in front of the articulation of the knee joint, we have a small bone which is called the patella. Pardon. The patella. So the patella is anterior to the knee joint. This is the patella. And the knee joint itself is formed by the articulation between the lower end of the femur and the upper end of the tibia. Now in the leg, we have two bones, not one, two bones. The medial bone is the tibia, and the lateral bone is the fibula. The tibia is the one that forms the knee joint, while the fibula doesn't. So if you are asked about the knee joint, it's formed of the articulation between the femur and tibia only, not the fibula. Not the fibula. Remember that. This is different than the elbow joint, where the humerus articulates with the radius and ulna, both bones together. But here in the leg, we have only one bone that forms the knee joint, which is the medial bone, which is the tibia. This is the tibia, and this is the fibula. These are the lower ends of the fibula and the tibia, as you can see here, that form the ankle joint. Ankle joint with what? With the tarsal bones. That corresponds to the carpal bones of the hand. This is the tarsal bones in the foot. And the metatarsal bones, like the metacarpals, and the phalanges, like the phalanges of the hand. Okay? So do not forget this, please. We have the hip joint between the upper end of the femur. We have one bone in the thigh, which is the femur. We have the lower end of the femur and the upper end of the tibia that forms the knee joint. And in front of the knee joint, you'll find the patella, اللي بنسميها بالمصري هنا الصابونة. صابونة الركبة. Patella. And in the leg or shank, we will find the medial bone, which is the tibia, and the lateral bone, which is the fibula. Lower end of tibia and fibula form the ankle joint, أو مفصل الكاحل, the ankle joint. That's articulation with the tarsal bones of the foot that articulate with the metatarsal bones and the phalanges. Okay, this is the arrangement of the bones of the lower limb. This is a plate of the real bones. This is the femur. This is the head of the femur, the upper end of the femur. This is the lower end of the femur. This is the right thigh, right femur. And this is the right leg. See, this is the bigger bone is called the tibia, the medial bone. And this is the lateral bone, which is the fibula. And as you can see here, only the tibia that forms the knee joint, not the fibula. Okay, and this is the patella. See, this is the patella. This is the lower end of the patella. This is the upper end of the patella. Okay. Now for the foot. The ankle consists of 7 bones, or the tarsal bones. They are 7. The carpal bones were 8, but these are 7 bones, the 7 tarsal bones. Okay? 7 tarsals. Okay. They articulate superiorly with the lower end of the tibia and fibula to form the ankle joint, and they articulate anteriorly with the metatarsal bones. Metatarsal bones. See? These are the metatarsal bones. The metatarsal bones articulate proximally with the tarsal bones and distally with the phalanges. See that? We start counting from the big toe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The big toe has only 2 phalanges like the thumb. زي كده الثumb في الهاند في 2 phalanges بس مش واحد مش 3. لكن بقية الأصابع فيها 3. Proximal, middle, and distal phalanx. See that? Proximal, middle, and distal phalanx. So in all toes, we have 3 phalanges each, except for the big toe, we have only 2 phalanges. Okay, this concludes the study of the appendicular skeleton. I hope you got the maximum benefit from this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.